So I'm excited to be here today because I work for myself and I work from home and I live in Geraldine, and so I don't get to go to many work-related events like this. So so I'm really excited to be here and be interacting with people in real life. What I'm going to talk about today. So I work for myself, and as working for myself, I'm called Teal Software. So what I'm going to start off with today, I'm going to give you a bit of background about me, because I haven't met a lot of you before, and the type of work that I do as Teal Software. So the focus of my talk today is about, I called it scaling down. And it's about right-sizing Power Apps implementations for small Kiwi businesses. And so this is about the Power Platform and Biz App Summit. But really, a lot of what I talk about isn't actually specific to Power Apps. It's about implementing any type of technology in a small business, especially if you're used to working with enterprises or large companies. So I want to talk a bit about, let's get a common understanding of what we're talking about when we say small business. And I'm going to talk a bit about what is different between the two, and in practice, what does that mean? So yes, there's differences, but what does it mean? What do we need to change or do differently when we're working with small businesses? And to keep it interesting, there's going to be a bit of Q&A, and there's also some spot prizes. Okay, so pay attention, especially if you've got a sweet tooth. Pay attention, and that goes for the people that are watching online as well. So I've got some spot prizes, and so long as you're in New Zealand, I can post them around New Zealand. I'm a bit too cheap to post them internationally, but yeah, if you're in New Zealand, I'll post out the spot prizes as well. Okay, and time and interest permitting, in case we finish early, or in case there's if we've got time, I would also like to discuss, if anyone's interested in discussing custom pages, because I have this love-hate relationship with custom pages. And so I thought I could tell you my number one top use case for using custom pages, and some of the problems that I've encountered. I don't have enough time to tell you all of the problems I've encountered, but I will just tell you a few of them. Okay, so
when you go say custom pages, you may want to just let them know what I say out, just to be double safe.
I will do that. So I'm already over here and I have to press my buttons and go to the next slide. I don't usually stand, and I walk around a lot when I'm talking. Okay, so what I've found, so it seems to me that people who end up working with a Power Platform often come from one or two directions, or one or two paths. Okay, so you've got some people who come from SharePoint, so they might have a modern workplace background. They've done a lot with SharePoint, and then they come into Power Apps because we can use Power Apps with SharePoint, and of course they use Power Automate. Or you've got quite a few people who come into Power Platform from Dynamics 365. So it tends to, so when I talk to people, it tends to be that a lot of people come from one of those two paths. So I want to know how many on the call and how many in the room. If you've got your phone, this is a Slido poll. If you wouldn't mind letting me know what path led you Has it worked?
Yeah.
Okay, I've got it on my screen here somewhere.
Fire results if you want
Oh, there it is, right at the bottom. Oh, this is why I shouldn't have done the two screen thing. Usually I'm really onto it, but obviously not now.
I guess it's still
Oh,
2010.
has it? Can you see it on your on your phone? Oh, so everyone else can see the answers except me. Okay, right. So,
2010.
usually when I present, I'm in my office and I'm presenting and I'm really comfortable because I know where everything is and I know how to work my screens and I know how to minimize that thing there. And I'm actually quite intelligent. It's obviously not coming across that way, but I am actually quite intelligent. Okay, so as the poll suggests, the answer, I didn't fill it in and I would be in the other category. Okay, so it sounds like a lot of people on the call or in the room have ended up with the Power Platform because they've come from SharePoint. Okay, and let me on here. Right, so thanks for sharing your background. So now I'll tell you a bit about my background and what I do as Teal Software. So I have been in the IT industry for more than 20 years, more than 2 decades. I'm in the middle of my 3rd decade working in IT, and I started in the IT industry. I did a software development degree, so I learned how to write code, how to design databases, how to run software projects, and my first technical job, I was a report writer at AUT University in Auckland. And so I was using VB6 and I was spending an awful lot of time in SQL Server Management Studio. My first job there as a technical person, as a developer, and I was getting all these error messages and I couldn't cope with not understanding all of these error messages. So then I landed in a BA role because I realized that firstly, I couldn't deal with all the error messages. So the DLLs are incompatible and I didn't even know what a DLL was. I realized that I could speak to the developers in their technical terms, and I could speak to them as an equal. But I was really good at talking to the business users and finding out what they needed to do, what their problems were, and translating that for the developers. Okay, so I have spent the majority of my career being a BA, being a translator between the business users and the technical people that deliver it. And I worked at AUT University, and that's a large institution. At the time, there were maybe 2,000 or 3,000 staff. There were maybe 25,000 students. Okay, so that organisation had some pretty complex IT requirements, the security, the infrastructure, and the sheer volume of users in that institution. After I left AUT University, I went consulting in the Auckland market. And again, in the projects that I worked on were in large organisations, public institutions, nationwide retail chains, places like Fonterra, big organisations. And just over 10 years ago, my husband and I moved our family to Geraldine. And when we moved there, at that time, remote working wasn't really ubiquitous like it is now. And I thought, well, is this the end of my career? And it turned out, no, it wasn't. It turns out that there was a software company based in Geraldine, and they implemented software into small and medium-sized businesses. So most recently, while I was working with them, and most recently I've been working as a BA and doing a lot of client-side project management. And when I went from working in these large organisations into these small and medium-sized businesses, I had to scale down my enterprise experience. I had to adjust it for the size of the companies that I was then working with. And I didn't always get it right. So to give some context of the type of projects that I work on, although I sometimes create Canvas apps based on SharePoint lists or libraries, 90% of the work that I do is based on Dataverse. I create model-driven apps that are extended by Power Automate. I create a lot of flows, but my customers have premium Power Apps licenses. They don't have Dynamics 365 licenses. They all have Microsoft 365 licenses because most people do anyway. So when I'm creating an environment, I'm always adding a Dataverse data store, but I never ever enable Dynamics 365 apps. Okay, so I don't come from a SharePoint background. I don't come from a Dynamics 365 background, and my customers have premium Power Apps licenses. And when I took this, I did a very similar presentation to this in Auckland in July, and I took that screenshot there where it says the per app and the per user plan. And then the next day, I went back in. I was going to take I think I was going to do a bigger screenshot of the page or something, and it wasn't there anymore. The per app price wasn't there anymore. So it's like a piece of history right there. Okay, so as Teal Software, so when I started as Teal Software 4 years ago, the Power Platform was just a very small fraction of what I did. And now it is all that I do. So I've sort of transitioned from doing the client-side project management and other BA work, and I focus solely on Power Platform. And what I've found is the types of projects that I work on tend to fall into 3 different categories. And I'm going to describe them to you now. So first up, I call these our we can't find what we're looking for projects. I've had a few customers come to me because they've been looking for a system and they've found a few packages that might work for them. But in these packages have far more sophisticated features than they will ever use. Okay, so there's all these features in these packages that they won't use, but they have to pay for the whole package. And so what we build is just what they need. Okay, we build just what they need. Whereas if they went with these packages, they would be their monthly subscription, they would be paying for the whole package, a lot of things that they wouldn't use. So we call these our can't find what we're looking for. Another type of project, and I believe that a lot of Power Apps fall into this particular category, we call these our plug-a-gap projects. It's where their existing technology landscape fulfills most of their requirements, right? Their existing systems and technology do nearly everything they need it to do, except for this one thing. There's one thing that it doesn't do. And so what we build that one thing, okay? And we call these plug-a-gap. We build an app that plugs a gap. And finally, the last type of project that we work on, we call these our talk nicely to each other project. And I named this one after my dad because when I was young, me and my younger sister, he was always saying to us, talk nicely to each other. And we didn't. And now as a parent, I can appreciate what he was going through. So these are for the customers come to me because they've got 2 bits of software and their business would run quite a bit better if those bits of software could exchange data. So what we do is we build a custom integration. So yeah, we call these our talk nicely to each other. Okay, so I work most predominantly with small and mid-sized companies, and what I'd like to know is, don't scan the QR code yet. Right, I have to start it. I stop that one and I start that. Okay, scan it now. Can you scan that? So what I'd like to know, so there's different ways that we can define what a small business is. So we could use number of employees or the total value of its assets or the annual revenue, etc. For simplicity's sake, I'd like you to say what you consider a small business to be in terms of number of employees. And just number of employees. It doesn't have to be FTE versus employees, just number of people. Does it tell me how many people? Oh, yeah, 12. It says it's 12 people have. Okay, so we had 42% say 0 to 20, 42 0 to 50. Someone says 0 to 100. So according to the NBIE, at the end of the presentation, I've got a slide and it's got some references on there. The NBIE, their definition is in New Zealand, a small business is a business with fewer than 20 employees. So that's the definition that they use. And Australia uses a similar definition. According to the NBIE, New Zealand has a higher percentage of small and micro businesses than any other country, well, than most other countries. And not only that, but many other countries our large enterprises tend to be smaller than large enterprises in other countries. There's a lot of countries that seem to define a small business as having fewer than 50 employees. But the NBIE, according to them, was 20 employees. So that's the sort of definition that I'm going with. Okay, there's a 0 to 20 is a small, 20 to 50 or 20 to 100 might be a mid-size. And anything more than that would be a large. So something that's interesting for me is that for Microsoft, and I've got a link to where they say this, a reference to where I say it. For Microsoft, a small business is one that has up to 1 to 300 employees. So if we think about in New Zealand, an organisation that has up to 300 employees, say 280 employees, in New Zealand, that's a large company, especially, I think if that company was out in the provinces, that would be a significant employer in that region. And so Microsoft and I don't necessarily agree on what a small business is. Okay, so for me, for the NBIE, up to 20 people, small business, and New Zealand really has a really high percentage of, we've got lots of small businesses. So why would we need a different approach? Why couldn't we just take an implementation plan from implementing it in a university, pick it up, plonk it into a small business and run with it? Why would we need to adjust our approach? So small Kiwi businesses, if there's one thing that you walk away with today, what I'd like you to understand is that small Kiwi businesses don't have layers. What do I mean by that? Let's think about an organisation chart. Let's draw an organisation chart in our heads, or I'll draw it up in the air. For example, for a university, we'll have the Pro-Vice-Chancellor, and then we'll have the deans. Thinking from an academic perspective, not an admin perspective, we'll have Pro-Vice-Chancellor and then the deans, there'll be someone out there for research, and then we'll have the schools, and then below the schools there might be some more different departments, different topics, and then down here, and down here are the tutors. Okay, so these large institutions have lots and lots of layers. But an organisation chart for a small Kiwi business, there'll be a box at the top and that'll be their owner, and then everyone else is below it in one layer. Okay, so small Kiwi businesses, they don't have layers. they don't have internal IT capability. So Steve mentioned earlier in the day that a customer, and they had 400 staff and they didn't have an IT department, or they didn't have an IT manager, which that's quite shocking, really. But these, I was quite surprised by that. But certainly the small Kiwi businesses, they don't have internal IT capability. They might have someone who's a bit of a whiz on the computer, is what they might say. Oh, yeah, she's a bit of a whiz. She's that's the person they go to when something happens. But they don't have internal IT capability. Like I said, this might surprise or scare some of the people who are modern workplace practitioners, but they use SharePoint as an online file share. They're not creating sites and libraries and setting up term stores and metadata, etc. Unless they have worked with a dedicated modern workplace practitioner, they use SharePoint Online as an online file share. A significant number of them use Xero. This here is a gem from one of my customers. When I think one day I was getting really excited about the Power Platform, and I say, "Oh, Power Automate does this, Power Apps does this," and pow, getting really excited. And she said to me, "Sarah, we don't care what it's called. We just want it to work." And so they don't care that Power FX now has its own logo, or that Power Virtual Agents is now Copilot Studio. They just want it to work. And something that I find really interesting is that our small Kiwi businesses are changing. And the reason they're changing is digital natives are becoming business owners. Okay, so I don't have any stats to back this particular point up, but this is my opinion, is that small businesses formed in the last couple of years, in my opinion, are more likely to have digital processes than a small business that was formed 20 years ago. Okay, a small business that's 20 years old. So I don't have stats to back that up, but that is but I think that's my, what's the word? That's my impression. That's my opinion. Okay, so yeah, digital natives are becoming business owners. So 20 years ago, they need their staff to be capturing some data. So maybe what they would have done was get a booklet printed in triplicate. One copy would go there, one copy would here, and bring the docker book back to the office when you're in there next. Whereas you start a business now, and a digital native is going to say, right, we need an app for that. There'll be an app for that because there's an app for everything. Okay, so those are some of the reasons why they're different or how they're different. But what does that mean in practice? What does that actually mean? What do we need to do differently, or what is different? Okay, so first of all, the project teams are smaller. In one sense, that's great because there's lower communication overheads. But in another sense, it's not so great because in a lot of my projects, the project team is me and the business owner. And so then there's less variety of input. There's less people to provide input. And I find that means that I need to bring a lot more to the table, a lot more of my experience, my broad experience across different industries. And so in corporate functions, what I mean by that is HR, payroll, accounts, health and safety. Perhaps not health and safety because that tends to be a person's role, but corporate functions tend to be a portion of a role and not a whole department. So they don't have C-suites. There's no CFO, CEO, or CIO, or if they do have them, it's said in jest because the owner brings their dog to the office, and the dog's got a dog bed in the office, and next to it is a little thing that says, "Here's our CFO. Here's Buster, the CFO." We'll have to get the CFO to sign off on that, and it's Buster the dog out in the reception. One of the things I love is that things happen faster. Because there's no communications overhead. I've got direct access to the actual users who are using the software, and I am talking all the time to the owner who signs off on things, and they in the moment can make a decision. Yep, no, that's a good idea. No, I don't think that's worth it, etc. So things happen faster, and I work directly with the end users. The reason I work directly with the end users is because there's fewer layers, right? There's no layers between me and the manager, or me and the owner and the users. Another thing that's different, they don't have citizen developers. Most likely, these of course are generalizations, and I do actually have a customer who does have a citizen developer type person in the company, but overall they don't have citizen developers. I think the relationship is different. I am more of a trusted advisor. I believe they put more trust in me than perhaps if in a large organisation. Or perhaps it's more that the trust comes earlier. From a practical perspective, when I'm implementing these model-driven apps and setting up Dataverse for them, there's less Dataverse security roles needed. And usually I'm only configuring two. There'll be a management role and a field worker role. If I'm doing integration as well, then there'll be an integration role. But imagine how many roles there would be implementing a CRM into a university call center, or into there's a lot less security roles. And that also flows onto to not just less security roles, but from when we're developing the forms, and there's less security to apply to the forms. Okay, I'm going for time. Good. Alrighty ho, spot prize time.
Lanyards of one up.
Oh, they've got lanyard. Yeah. Here's lanyard. Okay, this goes to the people online too. Will someone tell me if someone has a call? Yeah, okay, great. So there were 3 project types. Does anyone remember any of the names, or can you describe one of them? You don't have to remember the fancy name that I gave them.
Field worker. Is that right?
Field worker. The field worker was a role,
Oh.
not a project type. Oh, I didn't know who put their hand up first.
Nicely to each other.
Talk nicely to each other. Woohoo! So, I'll give you a choice. I've got a couple. I've got these really fancy, really stylish hats.
Oh,
And a hat. You don't know what the other one is, do you?
Oh, the other. The hat is on.
Okay, cool. Well, this is honey. So I sponsor a beehive. The beekeeper's daughter of Geraldine. And they had a new thing that started. They started a new thing last year where companies could sponsor a beehive. And so a beehive, we pay our money, and then they use the money to build a beehive and put a colony in it, so it gets our logo on it, so the bees know where to go. And then we get regular updates, and at the end of the season we get honey to give out. And I didn't give any consideration to how many was going to get words from jars of honey out to people. Okay, so we got talk nicely to each other.
Got people online for already answered. Put it in the chat. 1432.
Oh, okay. Who? And what did they get it right?
Got Thomas Barder.
It was all Thomas.
Thomas. So good one. Plug again.
Plug again, yes. What can you ask him what he wants? Does he want a hat or should I show him what a hat? I mean, the hat's pretty.
Yeah, just speak into your screen there and say, "What do you want, bro?"
Oh. A Peter bag. I don't know. I can't tell if it's.
I don't think you're video sharing, so I'll message it. It was hat or honey, is that correct?
That's right. Hat or honey.
Replied back saying thanks, I'm easy.
Oh, really?
From the whatever's left up to the next person.
Okay.
Next one, 50 power platform stickers.
Yeah, Power Platform. They're out of date now because they say Power Virtual Agent. So, oh, and does anyone know the last type? Can they? Sorry?
Can't find them.
Yeah! Do you want a hat or honey? Oh,
Just for clarification, Thomas said he'd grab the honey.
oh, okay, yep. I got lots of honey.
I got lots of hands too.
Yes, so well done remembering all of those. Well done, and well done to you. Was it Thomas online? Well done, Thomas. So what I've found, this is just based on my experience, no, I can't back it up by facts, just my experience, is that the people that have come to me because they can't find what they're looking for, or that the platforms out there are far more sophisticated than what they need. They've been smaller companies, 5 to 20. Where I've done the plug a gap projects, they have been a sort of a mid to large size, and the talk nicely to each other again have been the mid to large size. And they're not necessarily just one of those. So, for example, I did a project where I did a project for a local construction company that we had to produce something that was a plug a gap, but we had to get some financial transactions into MYOB Advanced. So they sort of were both of them. Any questions? Yes.
What's your most interesting lesson that you've learned in 4 years working for yourself?
Most interesting project or most interesting?
Most interesting thing that you've learned about running.
Yep. So as I on my website I've got a case study for a project that I did for a company called the Shed Shop. And the Shed Shop came to me because they were paper based. They used Dropbox and they did a lot of scanning and uploading to like a file store. And they wanted to digitize their processes because they were wanting to scale the business. And they came to me looking, and they wanted me to help them find some software because at that point I was still doing BA type work. And this project, it was awesome. It was awesome because it was quite an epiphany, because until that point I hadn't considered that we could build a core business system for a company using the Power Platform. I hadn't considered it from that perspective. I'm really passionate about. I think it's awesome for modernising legacy systems, and I had thought of all these different things, but it hadn't occurred to me that I would be able to build a core business system based on Dataverse. And so we looked at all these different things. And because they were a small business and they build custom sheds. So every shed is different, custom sheds, and they deliver and install. And so we sort of looked at manufacturing type products. And manufacturing type products we sort of did part of it, but they didn't do the delivery and install because these things are usually shipped. And then we sort of looked at trade-based things, and we can do the scheduling the install, but their production schedule worked backwards from the installation date, and these other things would work the other way. Anyway, so I didn't even give you a full explanation, but we ended up building then a custom solution built on Dataverse, and we digitized their processes. We used Azure services, Key Vault. They used to hand draw the shed diagram, the very basic diagrams, but now they use Visio. Everything is stored in SharePoint online, and they're using Dataverse, and we send out SMSs. We've got F0 integration, and it has revolutionized. That's what they say. It was revolutionized it, and he said it has far exceeded our expectations. And yeah, so that was great for me because I loved that project. If I got to work on projects like that all the time, I'd be really happy. But it was also a really important thing for me to realise that we could build whole businesses based on our thinking, based on data use. It's so powerful. Yeah, so that's what we should do.
Awesome.
Okay, any other questions? Because if not, I can spend a couple of minutes talking about custom pages. What's a custom page? Well, with Power Apps, the type of apps that we can build, this morning we heard about Power Pages, which are the portals, and while someone was doing their demonstration, yes, I think it was during the Power Pages demonstration, we saw some model-driven apps. So mostly when we're working with Power Apps, we're either building model-driven apps or Canvas apps. Model-driven apps allow us to define the data model and then build the forms and views based on those. Whereas Canvas apps, and with model-driven apps, we don't necessarily have a lot of control over the look and feel of the app. We don't have any control over the look and feel of the app. We can create sections and tabs, and we can determine where the fields are on the form, what columns are in the views, but we can't completely change the UI, for example. Whereas with Canvas apps, we've got a blank canvas, haven't we? We can put the controls wherever we want. We can colour them whatever colour we want. We can have something flashing on there if we wanted. And custom pages, they're sort of known or sold as a convergence between model-driven app and Canvas apps. Before custom pages, we would generally create a Canvas app and have an embedded Canvas app within the model-driven app. But custom pages allow us to do much nicer Canvas apps, and the Canvas app actually has access to the model-driven app runtime, and so then it understands the context of the model-driven app, so it knows you can tell it the entity that you're passing to it, and it has access to it. Not very eloquently said, but so. Hands down, my number one top use case for custom pages is to create or edit records in bulk. And I've created quite a number of them, different scenarios based on that same theme, creating or editing records in bulk. So what I'm doing in this GIF here is, this is a custom page inside a model-driven app. I'm not sure how you can see it, but behind here, it's display modal. The custom page, you can have it display. It can take up the total, all of the screen. It can be a side panel, or it can be sort of in the middle, like that one was. And what I do here is, so this was for a construction company, and they needed to create. So regardless of who it was for, what we're doing is we're creating a number of records of the same type with the same owner, nearly all the same data, except for one field is different. Okay, so one field that in this, they select the project and task, and then they create one record with the same values except different project and tasks. Okay, so I think I'd select like 8 or 9 project tasks, and then the corresponding a record is created for each one of those. So creating and editing records in bulk is my main use out of custom pages. Another example is with the header and line item pattern, like in Rich's presentation where he had his Canvas app for the invoice. An invoice has a header and then lines. So a header and line item pattern is something that I use heavily throughout the apps that I create, or the solutions that I create. And for a particular header, being able to add multiple line items quickly. An example is on a site docket for a construction site, and where they're saying what employees worked on that site that day, and say the employees all have the same start and end time and the same break duration, and they can do it in one step rather than so in one step you can add a record for five staff instead of having to do it in 5 steps. Another thing that I did was another useful one I actually created to speed up our internal testing, but it ended up being put into the product for the customer was so that I could trigger independent parts of the integration while we were testing, so I could do unit testing on different aspects of the integration. But yes, like I said earlier, anyone in the room or online do much work with custom pages? So something that I struggle with around in the whole, not just custom pages, but something I struggle with working with this technology is the rate of change. And isn't it something all these new features come out? But the thing that frustrates me is all these new things are coming out, but even finished the stuff that they've already created, already put out. I struggle with, is it some starts up on preview, but is it GA now? When's it going to go GA? And then other times then
I'm taking the feedback from the
it's like sometimes like we have these release waves, but then sometimes these things in the release waves don't even end up coming out. And so I really struggle with that. And I've got to the point where I'm not going to play with it until I know for sure it's going GA, because it's just, it's hard. A, it's hard to keep up, and B, it's sort of like a state of flux. When can I actually start using this in a production environment? And with custom pages, I really, really want to know. Custom pages are GA, almost. They are GA for any number of things, but not through the mobile player. Custom pages are still public preview for within the mobile player. And I didn't realise that, so I tried really hard to keep up with what's preview and what's GA, but I didn't realise that, and I put it into production for a customer, and we had an issue with it. And Microsoft won't help me because it's not GA. Yeah. So in general, I have this policy that I don't put anything in production unless it uses features that are GA. But I had a second in that instance because it was GA for nearly everywhere you want to use it, unless you want to use it on through the mobile player. So that's what I struggled with. So I struggled with that because I was having some problems. And recently I was building one and having a gallery. And I really wanted a flexible height gallery because it's, it's not always the same number of fields that are displayed. I wanted it to use that white space effectively and not have all these chunks of white space. But I used a flexible height gallery within a custom page with a container, and the text field. I enter text into the thing, and it doesn't say enter the text, move out of the field, and it doesn't say it, but yeah, so use with caution. But they can be great.
You'll feel some of that pain in different places. It's any time I get to talk with someone because I don't have a direct line to God, I don't know too many people that work at Microsoft, but anytime I do, so if you guys can find out for me about custom pages, going GA in the mobile player.
Something for somebody.
But yeah, so it's. But again, they got a lot of they have a lot of potential. I think custom pages.
You think about what it is in Copilot, right? Copilot's still not really there, but they want to be there. So that's where all their energy is. And then the new player in Power Automate, where all their energy is rather than fixing up some of the things like the HTML editor and there's all these things that aren't quite there, but it's not there. It's on backlog.
Yeah.
So it's got to, yeah. Yeah. They said that actually, I thought they said SharePoint would fix everything. Now AI can fix everything.
Maybe AI can tell me when it's gonna.
I think this morning's demonstration was fantastic example of what we should be worried about. Just me. Yeah. How much is it?
I did like it. Show me all the New Zealand businesses. And it said all New Zealand businesses. Hang in this area, you'll be all right.
What was it?
Just hang in there, just be.
One day it'll be okay.
Okay, so this is like a lot of what I said, I can back up with stats, and some of what I said was just my opinion. But if anyone's interested about our beehive, that you can scan that QR code and you'll find some more information about our beehive. So a local company, local to Geraldine, the beekeeper's daughter, they do that. And like I say, I get honey out of it. And what I'd like to say is thanks for the people that made this possible today.